Cool.
All right. So this is part 2 of our training tonight, which you guys have all probably been looking for. I'm trying not to be in the way here. Abby will.
This is going to be very distracting.
Great.
It's not going to turn off. I'm going to be looking at myself the whole time.
Yeah. So who we have here tonight are great. Well, at least you don't look like pregnant. Anyway, we have Abby and Allison here tonight. This is Abby. She's the K-5 director in Mason. So she has my role. She's been on staff for a little over 2 years now. Around that time. Yeah.
Just track of time around here.
I
think it's been 3 years, but I don't know.
And we also have Allison, who actually writes all of the curriculum for Kids Club here with us today. And she previously was K-5 director and
at one point,
did some
really
younger kids too. Yeah, for a little bit. So she's run her gambit here in Kids Club, but they're really special and honored guests. We don't always get to talk to the people that write the curriculum here in Kids Club. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen.
Hi, everybody. I know just a couple of you already from being at Oakley sometimes. I'm at different sites every weekend, so sometimes I'm at Oakley, sometimes I'm not. But yes, I'm Allison. I write curriculum for little 2-year-olds all the way to the 5th graders. And today we're going to be talking about trying out a new kind of experience on the weekend. And I'm really excited about it. The reason that we're considering trying something new is because, well, number one, we want to give kids the best possible experience we can. We want them to have as much fun. We want them to hear about Jesus. We want them to be engaged as they can. And I think, we've been doing our lessons a certain way for a while. We used to have just large group and small group and a lot more playtime. And then we introduced connect time into that. And that kind of changed the dynamic of the hour. And so now we're kind of thinking, based on volunteer feedback, based on how things are going, at all kind of different sites, what are ways that we can improve the experience for kids and for volunteers? What does it look like to test out something? So we're not making an official change that is definitely going to stay this way. What we're gonna explain to you guys is something that may change a little bit. It's something that we're trying out because really the only way to figure out how to have a better experience is to try different things, is to practice it in real life, is to, see how it goes week after week. So with that in mind, it might not be perfect at first. It might, it's change, just like any change, just like any new thing, you have to get used to it. It might not feel totally natural at first. So I would say, as you kind of get used to this new format, have an open mind, understand that, we're trying this out and it's kind of the only way to figure out what is really going to work. And we aren't just kind of trying this all of a sudden. Abby has actually been trying out this format for how many months now at Mason? A couple months.
What's the month today? April?
This is April.
April? So like 2 months.
Yeah.
2 months we've been doing it. And K-5.
Yes. So they've been trying this out. She's been learning a lot of different things and kind of changing the lessons based on those learnings. And so what's really important about this whole process, as we try out this new lesson format, is that, me and the people who are planning this and writing this and putting it into the rooms, we want to be paying really close attention to the feedback that you're giving us, because that's really the whole point of this, is to figure out how it goes for the kids, how it goes for you all, to get that feedback from you and then respond to it directly and kind of make changes based on how that goes. So, for the whole summer, at least, the lesson is going to kind of look a certain way, and it might change, as the months go on. So yeah, I'm really excited. I forgot we have a slide thingy.
help.
Sweet.
Oh,
that's-
it's exciting. We're excited.
Yeah. You can keep going.
That's what the
Keep
lessons
going.
look like now. Is everyone ready?
Yes.
Are you so excited?
Oh yeah.
Oh, change is coming.
We love change.
And everyone breathe. It's gonna be okay.
So I tried to change this because this is a little out of date now.
I don't know if people in there can see it.
Since 3 days
Oh
ago.
yeah, it's out of change. We're changing things as we go.
Yes. So what I want you to think of these is basically 6 parts.
We just covered this.
So think of it as part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it's going to look like us starting out in large group. Instead of going right into a game, we're going to go into large group and start out with like a really clear setting up of what the story is, of what the vision is for the day, so that kids, just to get them excited and so that they kind of specifically know what we're going to be talking about.
Like we're just gonna actually tell them, hey, we're talking about the
Literally.
early church this week, instead of like trying to get them to make the connection between the teamwork game and the early church, which sometimes I can't make that connection.
Indeed.
So
And then, so that'll be, these will each be kind of around 10 minutes is the goal. So after large group, we'll head into our first activity. So it says small group right now, but it might actually be typically like a connect time type game. So something active, something fun.
yeah, don't get
Probably.
hung up on the small group word, because that's why she changed it to like part 1, part 2.
Mhm.
Because on Sunday, as we were talking to the other leaders,
Indeed.
we were like, yeah, that's confusing. Small
Uh-huh.
group is confusing because it isn't necessarily in a small group.
Right. Yeah, and I think a big part of this is flexibility. So, it's going to be flexible and include ways for you to adapt it to what you need. So part 2 might be something like, some sort of active game. And then you're going to transition back into large group. And that's teaching, that's videos. And then part 4, that could be large group or small group. It's not going to be like an in-depth craft or something, but it might have minimal supplies. It'll be something, it might be a game-based thing. It might have something to do with cards or, I don't know, but something that is easy to transition to kind of in the middle of the hour. Then moving into part 5 is your third and final large group teaching portion. And again, you might have a video. That might be when we have worship and prayer, responding to stuff. And then the last part of the hour is always going to be small group. And so if there is something with more in-depth materials or crafty stuff, that's typically where it would be in the hour. So as you look through it, it might be overwhelming to kind of think of 6 different parts of the hour. How do we transition 6 different times? So I would challenge you to kind of think through, and she has really good thoughts on this and experience about kind of how transitions go and how you can make it easier on yourself. So I'm going to let her talk about that in a minute, but
Can I ask you a quick question? What's the kind of reasoning for going from the 3 large chunks to the 6 small chunks?
Great question. Kids have really short attention spans. I think we can all agree.
I have a short attention
something adults do. So I feel like something that is very common is that kids are having a harder and harder time staying in one place, listening, for example, a large group for 30 to 40 straight minutes, staying in their seat, maybe with some interaction, some kind of, broken up by videos and stuff, but it still can be really hard because kids learn in so many different ways. There's so many different learning styles. And we want to try a more kid-centered approach instead of just so much direct teaching. So with the 3 sections right now, it's more a teacher delivering that information. But with this, we want to experiment and see what is it like when kids are more the center? What is it like when they're actively doing stuff more, when they're, being asked questions, maybe in a small group a couple times in the hour instead of just at the very end. What does it look like for them to be like hands-on engaged at more parts through that hour?
If I can add to that
Yeah.
too, the idea was it started from feedback from volunteers that basically they felt like our curriculum was starting to be outdated, which I kind of ignored because I don't really like change that much. And I was like, that's okay. Like, we're doing good and it's predictable and I like that. But then I had a few interactions with kids one weekend, and their feedback was school is more fun than Kids Club right now. Like, we're doing more fun things in school. So I started teasing that out a little bit by talking to some volunteers who are teachers, younger teachers in elementary schools. And I talked to John Wilson, and they said, oh yeah, we would never stand in front of K to 5th graders and just talk at them for 30 minutes. So as I started to think about that, I was like, well, duh. Like, anytime that someone gives me a monologue, I think I'm absorbing the information. But when I walk away, probably a week later, I could not tell you what the training was about because I am totally a kinesthetic learner. Like, I have to be doing it. I have to talk about it. I have to hear about it. I need to use my hands. Like, I'm not just visual. Like, I have to be moving. It's really hard for me to even be sitting here right now. So thinking about that and just my own personal learning style and the things that I've walked out of, like trainings, knowing the best and understanding at a different level, it totally made sense to me why that they're teaching differently in school too. And it also was really overwhelming. Like, I don't know how to I don't know what that looks like in an hour environment. And I think what we do right now is really good. Like, we have good content. I love our God story videos. I love the things we do. So what does it really look like to just take what we already have and kind of organize it in a way that maybe gets kids moving or thinking about it differently? And I started noticing that if you repeated the same thing over and over again, that kids, it wasn't annoying to them. Like, that they were like, by the end of the hour, they were repeating it back and they were like, I'm so smart. Like, yeah, I know the whole verse now because we did it like 700 times. But, volunteers might have thought it was overkill, but the kids didn't seem to be annoyed by it. So that's kind of where it was like birthed, where it started. And it actually came from research and things that John Wilson did. And then I just had specifically one volunteer in my 1st and 2nd grade leader who had been a part of those brainstorming meetings last summer that some people in here might have been a part of that. There were people from every site that they wouldn't let it go. They were like, so whatever happened with those brainstorming sessions? When are we doing that? When are we, like, this isn't working. This isn't working. I can't just, like, my kid, I am losing the classroom. And they're good presenters. But the feedback I kept getting was, it's too long. Like, large group is too long and I'm losing that. It doesn't matter how many classroom management skills I have. It doesn't matter, like, discipline wise, they do not want to sit for that long. And I was even here on a Saturday night and I started laughing and was like, oh my gosh, I'm the distraction right now. Like, I'm talking to the kid next to me. Like, I can't even sit for this long. So that's kind of where it came from, just to give you a little background into why at least I felt like it was important and on our end.
Just curious.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, kids change. The way kids learn change. The way kids process information changes as they, become more dependent on digital stuff, as they, watch screens and get their information that way. That kind of changes the way that they're able to take stuff in. So I think with this, and again, let's say, we get a lot of feedback. This is going horribly. I mean, I don't think it will, or that certain parts of the lesson are not working, or certain dynamics. Like then we're not going to keep doing it that way. Then we'll make some changes and figure out, okay, how do we tweak this and address those things that you're experiencing?
Yeah.
So that's going to be really important that that we're responding to how it's actually going.
I would say as leaders too, a huge thing is the vision cast to your team that this is an experiment. This is like us trying to be, we want to be more fun. We want to do what we do with excellence. We want kids to continue to want to come back and to be excited to come to Kids Club and to bring their parents, like stories we already get, but like we want more of those. And like our church is national, we're on the like national level. So as Kids Club, we're kind of at this place where we need to keep up with that. Like we need to keep up with that level of excellence and create environments for kids where they can learn about God's story and how it applies to them, not just in a language they can understand, but like to all different kinds of learning styles. And right now we're mostly catering to one learning style. So casting that vision and the vision of flexibility, that's something that I've like hammered in so hard to my volunteers. Like, just go with me on this for a little bit. Just go with me on this for a little bit. I know like there might be some weeks we're in this together and we might walk out pulling out our hair. Like we'll make adjustments. This isn't necessarily like, this is how it is forever. Like, so that has been helpful just in looking at it and helping. The first weekend I did this at all, I was in the middle of the second large group and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't even know what's coming next. I feel stressed. I'm sweating. Like, I don't know what's going on. And I have to set up for another small group. And then I like turned around and realized that a little girl, first grader, who has never participated in large group. Like it's a constant battle to get her to come, the sandboxes in first grade, to come from the sandbox to large group. She does not participate in Connect Time, large group. If it's a craft, she will come to the table for the craft part. She will finish and she will go back to the sandbox. I realized she was in the large group. She was sitting with everyone in large group. And then I started to notice that's my most difficult classroom at that hour, most challenging, that every single kid was sitting in large group, which I've never, ever seen before in there, like actually in large group. And then when we got up to go to the next like small group activity, they all stood up and went to their groups, partially because they didn't know what was coming next. And so they were kind of interested, but also because they knew all the activities are timed. There's a timer on the screen. So instead of deciding, okay, I'm done and I don't know like how much longer I have to sit here, they knew, oh, okay, there's only 2 more minutes left. Like that timer's going to go off and we're going to do something else. I can deal with that. I'm not even going to get up. That kind of was this like win in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, like everyone's engaged. This is crazy. And I actually think that leads perfectly into my time lapse, doesn't it? Is that what's next?
I think you just got to move the mouse around a little bit.
Click it.
There you go.
Okay. So.
Oh, that was.
Oh, yeah.
You missed.
Oh, what? Oh, yeah. Okay. So this has not by any means gone perfectly. Like the first time I did it, I was like, holy cow.
How many times have you done it?
We've now done it for 2 months. Okay. Every single weekend, every single service. We have 3 services. So we have definitely ironed out some things and hopefully that will get passed down to you guys. Like you will benefit at least a little. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but you will benefit at least a little bit from some things we have walked through.
I put things in the lessons based on what you tried out.
And I'm still trying things. Yeah. Like I'm still reacting to feedback and things I'm seeing in classrooms and trying things a little bit differently. So nothing is ironed out perfectly. But my volunteers, this is feedback from my volunteers. And of course it's not all perfect feedback. I've gotten the feedback of, I'd only put the positive ones in here to make everyone excited. But so this is from the first one is from a 1st and 2nd grade volunteer. I forgot we were live streaming. And it says, I believe that it is making a huge difference in how our children are engaged in learning. Kids Club is already really good, but what we're doing is taking it to the next level. anytime most of our kids know and can tell you what the lesson for the day is about, is what you would call a big win. I saw that on Sunday. They all understood that the widow gave all, and she was really important to God, and that we should be generous to all. This is from a 3rd to 5th grade volunteer, and he said, what your changes are doing is addressing every type of learning style, which helps to keep their attention and ensures that most of them get it and keeps them focused. And then my 1st and 2nd grade leader said, I love the new lesson format. I feel like activities are more engaging. The kids are spending more overall time with hands-on activities because the actual teaching portions are shorter. I feel like the kids are more engaged, more willing to participate, and retaining more. The other really cool thing that I think you'll see is that parents are coming in during small group. It's not keeping them in small group is not a struggle. You're like usually still in small group when parents get there, which is awesome because we're hammering home the same points throughout the entire hour and talking about them in different ways. Kids are remembering what they're talking about or what they talked about for the day. So parents will come to the table to get the kids or the group to get the kids, and kids will have an answer to what did you talk about today, which sounds super crazy, but I feel like a lot of times I hear like, I don't know, or
Jesus.
I saw the Bible, but I actually am getting to see little moments of connection between parents, guardians, whoever's picking up a kid at a table because they're still actively engaged in whatever they're working on. And so parents are kind of coming into that zone with them a little bit and talking to them about, even if it's just a word search or a maze, whatever it is they're working on. So that's been really cool, little moments of connection between parents and kids, more so than I've usually seen. So the first weekend we did it, I made a time lapse. This is the weekend I was like, I don't know if we can do this. And it's really fast. So I'll try to tell you what's happening as it happens. This is just check-in and free play or whatever. This is the first large group. And now we are going back to tables for activities. Then we had the second large group, back to activities, back for worship, that was large group, and then back for another activity. I didn't talk fast enough, I'm sorry, and that's checkout. On Sunday, it was buffering for the whole time, and so I had so much time to talk. So, up, down, up, down, up, down. Now, that being said, we've learned a lot about the up, down since then. That's probably the biggest challenge is the transitions between large group and small group. So, do I have any other slides? I don't want to like get ahead of myself. Yeah, okay. I'm good at this. Look, I anticipated my challenges before they were up there. What?
Animals falling over.
Yeah, it's all good, guys. It's all good. Okay, so this is what I anticipate based on my experience, my volunteers' experience, what I've seen, what I've experienced, what I anticipate challenges being with this and your challenges and your team's challenges. Transitions are so hard. They're harder in the younger grades. Kindergarteners are probably the hardest grade. That's where we're struggling the most. And I have learned that depending on, because of this lesson allows so much flexibility, depending on your kids, your room, your team, it might be easier to do large group, start large group on the floor, stay in large group for whatever the next activity is. They just sit back down for the next large group, and then you stay at whatever the next activity is, you continue to do as a large group. Then you don't go back to the small groups until activity full, like the last activity. So typical small groups, which essentially makes it a more interactive large group. Does that make sense? So for instance, my 3rd to 5th grade rooms are pretty much staying actually at their table for everything with their group for the entire hour. So now my 3rd to 5th grade rooms are different than your guys's. They're more square so they can see the screen from their tables, but they seem to like staying with their group. They like the fact that they can kind of finish working on their maze or whatever while they're watching a God story video or listening to the presenter do the large group portion. my first grade room will actually get up and move for every transition because those kids want to move. They need to move. Second grade has been struggling with those transitions, and they actually probably had the easiest room, my 915 crew. They did not have behavioral problems. They did not have any like fidgety kids. They actually had a really good group. And so we've been working through, they said, it feels like we created a problem where there wasn't a problem. Like we threw in changes where there really didn't need to be. We didn't need them. So with that group, after a few weeks, we're like, okay, the problem is definitely the transitions. We're losing them. So we got rid of 2 of the transitions. So that just means they start on the floor, they hear what we're talking about, they go to their tables, which is where they do small group, and they stay there through the activity, the second large group portion, and the third activity. And then they stand up for worship, and then they go back for small groups. And that's alleviated the issue of kind of reining them back, getting them back after every single transition. So there's flexibility in what that looks like for your kid, what your kids can handle, what they need, what your team can handle. It also allows for more engagement of your team because the portions are so short. It doesn't really require a presenter. It requires more of a room director, or the rooms I've seen it work the best in are when the team kind of comes together before and says, hey, I'm going to do activity 1, or I'm sorry, let me use the new lingo that she just made up. I'm going to do part 1, part 2, you do part 3 and 4, and she'll do 5 and 6. And you have the red group, I'll take the yellow group, and you take the orange group. So what that means is that person, whoever has those parts, leads from the microphone and tells them what they're doing, but the adult with that group stays with their group the whole time. So they get the instructions from one person or the content from one person, but then they still have a small group leader. And they've split it up between, the 4 volunteers. So it's not a ton of responsibility just on one person. I've pretty much seen it, that at this point, I think I've seen it done every way you could come up with, unless you can come up with a different way, in which I would be really impressed because I've seen some really weird things. I've seen people lead all 6 sections like themselves, and which I don't recommend like that unless you are incredible. But I would not take that on because it's a lot and it's really boring for the kids to listen to the same person for 70 minutes. It's fun to get to hear different voices and have different personalities on the microphone. I think that breaks up the time as well. But I have a volunteer who's really, really energetic, and she leads the entire 70 minutes pretty much. And then the other volunteers just act as support in between transitions. And during small groups, she says, we're going to make this thing, and tells them how they're going to make it. And then she goes to her small group and does the questions and stuff. So she's still connecting with kids. That is not the common way, though. That takes a special person. I don't like to do that. She's really good at it. I don't have any other rooms that really do it that way. I'm trying to think.
Do you want to explain the colors?
Oh, yeah. So one way that we are helping with transitions is every time kids check in, they get a colored dot sticker. So you can have up to 4. This is another place there's flexibility. You can have up to 4 groups. I prep for 4 groups in every room. Some of my volunteers assign 4 colors no matter how many volunteers they have, which also
Oakley may have more than 4 groups. I mean, that's for me.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm talking. Sorry. Yes. Some of my volunteers do the standard 10 colors.
No, you have 10 minutes.
Oh, they're going to have 10 colors? Do they make that many dot stickers? Sorry. Some of my volunteers do this typical, and it seems to work better, actually. if they only have 2 volunteers, they only assign 2 colors because that means there will only be 2 groups. Kindergarten prefers, because they're already leading small group from the mic, they were already doing that. They found it was easier to break the kids up and not let them all be together. So instead of having like 2 groups of 6 or 8, they have like 4 groups of 4. And then they lead small group from the mic. But pretty much everyone does. You can do it either way. So kids get a color dot sticker, and then the supplies for every activity is in a bin for that small group, labeled, ready to go. So all you have to do when you get there is take your bin to your table, and it's broken up by service time. So my 9:15 has all their stuff in there, and they know they're the yellow group, and I have flags. I don't know what Kristen will have for you guys. It might just be folded piece of paper. Whatever, it doesn't matter. The table is labeled with the color. So kids know by their dot sticker which team they're on or which group they're in. And they just go back to that group every time you tell them. And now we're playing this game with your team, or you're playing this game with your group, or head back to your table. So tables are marked. Their stickers are marked. Yeah.
Do we want to head into question and answer time?
Yep, I think that's great.
Sweet.
I don't know what
Those
that
are
is.
my
I didn't make that. Kristen did.
Yeah, so for my action steps, like just a couple of things. Start talking to your teammates now that there are going to be some changes coming.
I don't think you should talk to them about it. I think you should just wait until it happens and see if they notice.
Abby did that to one of her
I did that to my core Saturday night volunteers in 3rd to 5th grade, and actually they handled it like champs.
Yeah, hopefully it's too big of a ship. I'm never going to do that to my people.
I don't recommend that.
Yeah, so start talking to your teammates now. The first weekend that we're going to have the new curriculum is Move Up Weekend, so the first weekend of June. I see this really only being a huge problem that happening that weekend in kindergarten, because we have kids that are coming from preschool up to kindergarten. They have no idea what's going on. But I could also be wrong, because they have no idea what's going to go on. They could also be the most flexible, because we're not making them sit still.
That's true.
Marianne
They don't sit in that pot anyway.
They don't sit down here. They're not going to sit up here anymore.
They're going to get up as many times as they do in preschool.
Yeah.
We're talking about the second and third. That's the first weekend is the second and third. That's
Yes, the first weekend of June. Yep, that's the weekend that they move up to a new grade.
Okay.
Encourage your volunteers to attend the May training. It's going to be called a speaker training. We're going to be having Abby and Allison back for the second hour, but we're going to encourage people that have been leading Connect Time, that have been doing a small group. They could be one of the people that could be leading those parts as we break out, to help with your room, so that you're not the only person leading the hour. 1, because it's boring. And 2, it's just not manageable. You do not want to be talking for 70 minutes in front of these kids. So encourage them to attend the May training. That's for all speakers in Kids Club. They can learn some skills. And really, these chunks are like 5 to 10 minutes. Anyone can explain some directions to kids for 5 minutes. Anyone should be able to do this.
And Kristen, when is the May training?
It's just in May. At
No.
any time. Just show up in May.
It's May.
May.
I
We'll
believe
see you
it's-
in May.
I believe it's the 20th.
I should put that on my calendar, probably.
It's the same as this. It's the 20th and the 23rd. And hopefully by that time I'll be better at streaming. So they'll have the option of Sunday afternoon, Wednesday evening, Eastside's joining us, and I'll stream it. So, and everybody should be getting an RSVP out later next week. And then observe your room. Like, what changes do you need to be making? If you're going to be doing tables and stuff, I know the kindergarten room, I've talked to a couple of people about taking some of the toys and pushing them to the other side of the room and making tables kind of surround the carpet area. So it's just really easy for them to
That's
do
what I was
transitions.
wondering. We usually use the tables closest to the exit, but I was thinking, I wrote down maybe use the tables that are right there. Might be easier.
Yeah.
So
So those are some of your action steps.
Yeah. That's a major change. In my kindergarten rooms are rectangular, and the tables are over here, and the screen is over here. So there's no way to not transition. And that's the room that needs to be able to not transition. So we have moved the tables to where so they can see the screen, and volunteers can choose to just leave them at the tables if everything's going well. And the second huge change is first and second grade, they've asked to not have stages, so we've pulled out stages. Since it's more of a, like, you're floating and you're moving, they wanted all the space in the room they had. Our stages are different, are more like your kindergarten stages than your first and second grade, which made it a lot easier. She's passing out an example lesson, or the first, I don't even know what she's passing out, but it's probably a lesson.
And do you do this whole curriculum?
Uh-huh.
All of it?
Yeah, girl kills it, right?
By the way, you're amazing. I look at this every week. I'm like, how do you do this every week and make it awesome every week? That's amazing.
Yeah. So I would like to say, you think she's amazing, and I thought she was amazing, and then I was like, she's amazing, but like, listen, it can't be that hard to copy and paste and put it in a new format. I can do this myself. I don't need help. It's really hard, and I'm only doing it for 2 lessons. I'm like, I don't know how you do this. Like, I'm pulling my hair out. Like, oh my gosh, it's really hard. I'm not creative enough for this. Is that it? Oh, questions. Yep. Does anyone have any questions? Any thoughts?
Say them nice and loud.
I heard you say that you had some kind of timer up. I mean, is there going to be a timer incorporated?
Yes. So every activity will have a built into the keynote a timer. Every activity is every part except for like large group. Every activity, yes, it'll be on the screen. 10 minutes. It will always be 10 minutes. So every game they play, you'll have 10 minutes to play. Every craft, there's 10 minutes for it.
Great.
So that means that we
kids
really
love it too. They will they're like 10, 9, 8, and then they immediately get up and head back to the where the screen. Like our kids are now starting to know what's coming next a little bit. At least that something else is happening and they can do something else.
So we talked a little bit on Sunday about like timing and when you start your room. I think we've been sort of tending to start later in the hour because maybe large group is too long and we don't want them to sit there so long, so we let them play longer, or we just can't anticipate how long an activity is going to be. And now that it's set time, when do you guys start at Mason, and how does that look like?
We start 5 minutes after service starts, so that means that we still have kids checking in while we are talking.
Volunteers to be checking.
Yeah. So there's one person presenting the terminology that we're used to. One person presenting, and there's usually one person still doing check-in for stragglers. The nice thing about it is kids are coming in while they're hearing what they're talking about. So they might miss some of it, but usually by the time it's time to get up for the first activity, they have a general idea of what they're talking about, and they're there for the game time, which is the best time. And they're coming into instead of checking into sometimes I'm sure what can feel like chaos, they're checking into what looks like something's happening that looks fun and organized. And I would recommend the first weekend you do it, starting, for the first 3 weeks, we started right at service time because getting to know each room and the kids that you have and how they're going to handle transitions and what works best for your team, like small group wise and how many groups, all of that took some time. That took a few weeks to kind of learn each room and what worked best for each team. So I would anticipate extra time for transitions and bloopers when you're first doing it.
And also, we totally understand, like, it's 11:45. You have so many kids coming in at like 20 minutes into the service. So, it's okay if it takes a little time to get to the point where you're starting earlier than you used to. It's okay if, maybe these first couple weeks you don't get through all 6 parts. Yeah. Maybe you have to adapt, and maybe you can't get to the 6th, or maybe you have to take out one of the games. You want to try to do everything you can because, you want to give it a chance. But we also know I'm writing these in a way to make them as adaptable as possible so that it can be flexible for you guys. And so if on the fly you need to change it, it can be kind of clear a way that you can do that.
For instance, the kids are going to love this craft. We know that it takes forever for our room to do transitions, but that game looks really easy. What if we switched when we do the craft and when we do the game? So that they for sure get to do the craft because they're going to love that. and the flexibility thing, like casting that vision to your team is just so crazy important in case on the fly you make that decision. Or I'm constantly telling they're like, we didn't get to the last small group. And I'm like, that's okay. You went over those 6 questions 3 times before then. So yeah, they're sad they didn't get to finish their craft or mom and dad made them leave, but like they can take their stuff with them. They can finish at home. Like that's not the point is not that you got it all done. The point is they totally walked out of here knowing what you talked about today and they heard it in different ways.
So how does this impact like how the presenters sign up or is it like, you know what I'm saying? Like how are you picturing that?
That's going to require a lot more coordination between the presenters that you have in your room and your room leaders. Some of them are the same people, so that's pretty easy. But really, it's the room leader who needs to take the charge and say, who's in, who's going to be speaking this week, and let's kind of figure it out. It might be for the summer that we don't have a presenter schedule. I'm still keeping it up there because as a default, we have someone signed up to lead all 3 of those sections because there's 3 speaking parts and 3 activity parts. But that's going to require some flexibility on our part too. Presenting is going to look a lot different.
My recommendation for your first few times is that you still assign a presenter and that person leads the 3 large group portions, even though they're shorter, because there's going to be so many changes that's the lead. That should be, don't worry about that. So still assign your presenter, have that person prep, and it's basically like their presentation got interrupted twice to do some jumping jacks, and then, you know, whatever. And you can figure that out as you go. And as you people get more comfortable with it, then it's easier to say, hey, do you want to lead the shortest part of the talking today, like large group part 1? And then you only end up leading 2 of them. But as I've looked in, like I did not do that with my volunteers. I was just like, y'all can do this. You just pick what you want to do. I think that was, and I was also like, and pick how many small groups you want and pick how you transition or if you don't transition and pick what order you want to put it in. That was too much. Like that was too many options. I don't like options, so I don't know why. I just need 2 options. My husband put it in his vows. He said, I promise to only ever give you 2 options when picking where to eat. And I gave my volunteers like 15 options. So
we only give kids 2.
I know, and I need 2 as well. So I would say still assign a presenter because then you're only dealing with the 3 activities and you're easing into it a little bit more. Because then
I can see how there would be like a lot more advantage to if people took the time to read it. Like they will feel less overwhelmed if they take the time to, because there's a lot going on here. You know what I mean?
Which is why it would be probably beneficial to have at least a presenter assigned so that person isn't in their script the whole time.
I mean, we like to get to the point where it's not the same person speaking every single transition.
It seems really conducive to raising up new leaders since it's little short.
Definitely. Yeah. That's, and all your people should be reading the lesson. Like that, those are some big points to drive home before.
It definitely makes it easier to, I feel like, at least for me, I'm not a memorizer. It's easier to prepare because I know what's coming, but I'm not worried about memorizing it. So it's like, okay, I know that we're talking about the early church. That's when we're going to do that verse. And I know we're making a boat. And then I know we're going to play the charades game. And then we're going to do that God story video. Like, I know what's coming, but I don't have to memorize it.
Well,
it's
like
way
a lot of times now during the video, I might look at my
yes.
stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's kind of like that almost.
Yeah. It is really hard if you have never looked at it. It is not like you walk into the room and you're good to go. Like, it definitely requires looking at it ahead of time.
Are you still going to push it out like this is going to be K1, 2? Because K is going to go a lot slower than 2. It's going to be good.
What's your question?
This is going to be the same script for K to 2?
Yes, or I mean, they'll be different, but the same, like they both have this new format.
So you'll kind of water it down for kindergarten?
Yes, yeah, like they'll have different activities and
you're saying
the different
K through 2 will have the same.
yes.
It 2 has the same.
But that's
yes.
But that's kind of where the flexibility of your room comes into play. Like if you know that your kids after week 1 are struggling with that second transition, like you have the flexibility to.
Yeah, my kindergartners are not doing the same thing as my second graders.
We could even move some of the rugs in kindergarten tables. By the counters, maybe.
The organization of the room.
My
So you'll have
kindergarten.
a different group for K, then you'll have 1 and 2.
No.
No.
It's still going to be, the lessons are still kinder to second and third to fifth. That's still like the breakdown. My kindergarten volunteers at one service right now are doing large group 1 and 2 back to back. So they do that presentation together and then they play 2 games and then they do the last part of large group. That's how they've kind of eased into it. So there's flexibility in that.
I do want to
And
be
second grade's not doing
mindful
that.
of people's time. It is a little bit past our time together. If you want to stay for more questions, that's great, but you also have the flexibility to leave. Please take some note cards for your volunteers. Don't forget to love them. There's going to be a lot of transition for them, so love on them ahead of time.
Cards. They need
Love on them ahead of time.
retention.
And take some food with you. So I think that's all for the live stream.
Thank you so much, you guys, for
Bye.
being open to this, for being open